In watercolor, we paint from light to dark. And what that means is, through each phase of the painting, we have to remember what is the light that we're trying to preserve. So today I'm going to help you develop a game plan to make this a little bit easier. And I think you're going to find that it's not as stressful and as difficult as you might imagine. Step number one is to identify the lightest areas of your painting. When you first look at a scene, you need to start to think about, how am I going to paint this from the lightest values through to the darkest values? And right away, we want to think about, what is the brightest area of the painting? This could be a figure, a vehicle, a certain part of the landscape where the light really needs to be preserved. But that's the first step, is to take a look at your reference photo and identify that lightest area of the scene. Once you've identified this area, you can incorporate that into your planning process. I do a pencil drawing on my paper before I start to paint. And when I do this drawing, I'm already beginning to think about values. What's the lightest area of the scene? What are the middle values? And what are the darks? And as I'm drawing this, I can outline where that brightest part is going to be. So right from the beginning, I'm already thinking about the process and where my lights are. Step two is create a value study. A value study is where you take a look at your scene and you simplify your values into three groups: the lights, the mids, and the darks. And this can really help you get very clear and very specific on the lights that you need to preserve in your painting. The way that I do a value study is, I leave the lights as the white of the paper. I identify what the large middle value shape is. And that's really a big part of what these value studies are about, because it's hard to look at a complicated scene and determine all of this. So doing this study helps you work out some of these problems before you start to do your painting. It's almost a dress rehearsal for your painting process. So after you've done this study, you already have a good idea of how you want to lay out the scene, where your lights, where your mids, and where your darks are at. After you've determined that and you've worked out your composition, now we're going to work on the actual painting. You can reference this value study as you work your way through the process. You're actually drawing the scene a second time onto your paper. This study becomes your roadmap, and it makes it way easier to preserve the lights through each phase of your painting if you've created a value study. Step three is to use your roadmap. Now that you've created a value study, you essentially know what you're going to do in each phase of the painting, and this makes it way less likely that you're going to just paint through something that you're trying to preserve. As we paint through the scene from light to dark, in the first wash, we are laying in our lightest values. Now, if there is an area of the paper that you want to leave white, this is the time that you do that. Once that dries, we're moving into the middle values of our scene, and it's important to work from a wet edge and paint this as a connected shape through the scene. And in doing this, it's going to help you to preserve the lights of the scene, and you're less likely to paint through something that's important because you've already developed this plan and you're painting it in an orderly way on your painting. Working methodically from a wet edge across the scene, rather than just jumping around and painting everywhere that you feel like painting, is a good way to preserve those lights and ensure that you're not painting through something that you meant to preserve. This system is a good way to build up the painting from light to dark and to understand what you are trying to accomplish in each phase of the painting. So if you can use this method, you'll be less likely to paint through something that is important. Despite having this plan and working through your painting methodically, mistakes are going to happen. If it's a small little highlight, you don't even need to worry about preserving it. You can come back in with some gouache, or you can use another method of scraping. You can use a razor blade and scrape out some really fine highlights. So there are options for tiny little highlights around the scene that are really hard to paint around and avoid. Use these methods to preserve the light through each phase of the process and create a stronger painting. Have you ever been really excited about a painting and you get all set up, you find that right reference that you're excited about, and then it's time to go and you feel lost? You ever had that experience? You just are having a hard time finding consistency. Some of your paintings turn out, some of your paintings don't turn out, and you're not really sure why. Well, I have a free resource that I want to give to you today that can help with these problems. My 5 steps to plan a successful watercolor painting. I walk you through the crucial planning phase of your painting that will help you understand what you're going to paint first, second, and third. The planning is really so important, especially in watercolor. This medium is harder to correct. It's so immediate. So having that plan is very important. I send you a PDF that you can download. And the great thing about this is you can have it on your phone, you could print it out, and you can take a look at these crucial planning steps before you start each painting to ensure that you're thinking through these important things as you get started. You can download this right now before you start your next painting. All you have to do is follow this link here and download my 5-step guide to planning a successful watercolor painting.